Hey everyone, welcome to Just Shoot It, a podcast about filmmaking, screenwriting, and directing. This episode is brought to you by patrons Noah Alexander and Nathan Bailey. I'm Oren Kaplan.
And I'm Matt Enlow. Today we got Numa Perrier on the show. She's the filmmaker behind the Netflix-released film Jezebel, but she's also got a really storied and really interesting history in online video and kind of the forefront of web series. So we dig in deep on her transition from being a DIY do-it-yourself internet filmmaker who've built her own audience and found a ton of success there, leveraged that into selling a show to HBO, and then ultimately making kind of all at the same time her breakthrough independent film, Jezebel.
And she also was, discovered by Ava DuVernay and asked to direct an episode of Queen Sugar. She's done all sorts of awesome things, and she is the epitome of just shooting it. Yeah.
She's exactly she is evidence that just shooting it is the thing to do.
Yeah. Talk about someone that does not stop shooting things and does not stop making things no matter what happens. And then you'll be talking about Numa.
This is a spoiler, but she was in the process of shooting, oftentimes acting in, directing, and showrunning multiple web series all at the same time. They had a small window where they could take a quick break, and instead of catching her breath, she was like, what if I fly myself and a crew out to Las Vegas and shoot an indie feature instead?
Yeah, in 2 weeks.
In 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That gets into South by Southwest and then onto Netflix.
Those were the days. Do you feel like you still have it in you, Matt, to just go do something crazy like that?
Especially where it feels like you can't because of the quarantine. That's all I'm thinking about.
Well, yeah. Would you have done it before the quarantine?
Yeah, I mean, look, I made a bunch of web series before one clicked. I just shot a indie feature in my apartment this year.
Yeah, I guess you would.
I probably would.
I guess it's just me that's the lazy one.
No, it's not that you're lazy. It's that you're motivated towards different things. We've got a long, great conversation with Numa, so we'll keep our catch-up quick. But I think it's worth talking about. I've been really trying to put my producer hat on and figure out what my next project is, because I'm finishing up a screenplay that I really love. And, I'm going to take it around, but it's time to start writing the next thing so that I'm just kind of keeping this momentum going. And I really had to reckon with the reality that just because you have a good idea for a movie, even a great idea for a movie, that's just the baseline for where you start. And that doesn't mean that it's the idea you should make next. So thinking through putting that producer hat on and figuring out, is there an audience for this movie? Is there a budget for this movie? Are people making these types of movies? It would be foolhardy for me to write a giant studio comedy, for instance, that's not based off of IP when they're not really making big studio comedies right now.
Yeah. I mean, unless, there's that movie Eurovision that just came out on Netflix. Would you call that a big studio comedy?
I would call that a big studio comedy that's starring Will Ferrell. So it was developed, I'm assuming, by his company, right? And then also has a huge international appeal. So Eurovision only works because it spans a global audience, and so it makes sense for Netflix. You can't make, if I wrote a domestic, something where it doesn't travel and doesn't have music and doesn't have international appeal, and also is going to cost $30 million, there's just not a world where people make those movies right now. And I can wish that. I want that to be the case. I want people to make those movies, but they're not right now. And until I am so successful that people are falling all over themselves to make the next Matt Enlow movie, I should write a movie that either I can make myself or that's going to attract cast that is also cheap enough that we're going to really recoup our money. There's all that kind of those other pieces of the equation that you really have to think about. And I thought to myself, a great idea is just the bare minimum.
For sure. I honestly can't even imagine myself just writing something and trying to sell it anymore. I can't imagine a version where I'm not writing something, then shooting pieces of it or doing some previs or getting an actor talent excited about a certain thing. That whole, here's a script, give it to my manager, see if you can sell it, is
even with great proofs of concept and even maybe with an attachment, the fact of the matter is, if Disney makes 10 movies a year and they're all sequels or reboots of IP, then Disney's not making that new movie. So it has to be a Netflix movie then, right? Okay, well then let's go ahead and take a look at what does Netflix need in order to make a movie now. International appeal is a big part of that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to me, like the proof of concept part of it is like trying to get it sold, but the other part of it is like answering that question that you're asking, like, is there an audience for this? Like, can I get people super excited about this?
I guess what I'm saying is that even if people are super excited about it, that doesn't mean that there's a company out there making the type of movies that you're making. So the question to me is not, is it good enough to get people excited? And maybe that's, you need to prove a concept to show that. Maybe you just need a great screenplay. I'm saying knowing who the buyers are and what they're buying is kind of the first step. And then you kind of have to reverse engineer to like figure out a movie that you're still passionate about and is still great, and that you're still going to be committed to writing and then shooting the proof of concept for, and also putting together the pitch deck and then pulling favors to get introduced to, an up and coming movie star. You still have to do all that stuff, but you have to know that the hot dog stand out there that's selling hot dogs is still selling hot dogs. Does that make sense?
It does, but I guess that's only if you're
like, don't make hot dogs.
$50 million movie or something. But if you want to make like a Blue Ruin, a Babadook, like anything like that, if you want to make Under Her Skin, like you can still kind of go make those movies without having Disney, who makes 10 movies, pay for it. Without a doubt.
But then you have to figure out, okay, if that's the goal, if that's the plan, then you have to figure out a way to write something that talent is going to be excited by, or that is talent proof, that the conceit is so exciting and interesting that it kind of reinvents itself or leans into a genre. All of those kind of different elements, I think, are, it's something that our audience knows and that we all always know. But I think whenever you're starting a new project, really, putting whatever ideas you're thinking about through the ringer of like, what is it really going to take to get this movie made? And does the idea fit the criteria that I'm looking at right now? Are the most important questions, basically.
Right. And I guess I'm saying I'm looking at the marketplace, and what I'm seeing, where I'm seeing breakout films come from, are less people that aimed for what people are buying and more people that are selling like tone and approach, much more than a perfectly structured comedy script, or even like a great sci-fi idea. I'm seeing people get excited about like, oh, look at that, this is a satire, it's funny and it's sci-fi and it's like super sad, and it's hard to do that, capture that in a final draft document. But if I shoot a few scenes, I think you would get it. Like, I guess I hear what you're saying. I'm saying what you're saying is totally, I agree with. Like, you shouldn't write a $50 million studio comedy right now and expect to sell it. But I'm saying I can't even imagine any script selling without me showing people what it will look and feel like. I do feel like a lot of originality is being rewarded, and a lot of like unique approaches and voices, and like doing things in ways that people haven't done before. And when you're pitching a movie in a way that hasn't been done before, no one is going to buy it off the script, unless you're famous or you have someone attached.
Yeah.
It's very big.
I think we're talking about sales approach, right? Like what you tool up with, what you have in your arsenal to sell with, versus who you're selling to. And I'm saying, if there aren't any hot dog stands on your block, don't make a bunch of hot dogs.
But I do think that something like, Numa talks about this a lot, about her show that she got a deal with HBO on. And, we talk about High Maintenance and all these other shows, Broad City. And I know those references are kind of dated by now. But the idea that those shows existed and created stars pretty much out of nowhere.
Sure, absolutely.
Is because those people showed something that had never been seen before. And I think,
but I'm not saying don't do that. Yeah, I'm not saying don't make the very best, most unique, incredible hot dog of all time.
Yeah. I guess the part where we agree is do not write a mid-range studio comedy right now.
Yeah, but you can write that idea, and that voice is flourishing right now on Netflix or
on
something
TV,
like that on TV, right?
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying.
So
just
write
because
the pilot,
I want to write the pilot instead of writing the feature, that's easy, right?
Yeah. It's shorter too. Well, cool. Well, I'm excited to see what you got next. But before we start talking to Numa, I just want to remind people that we do have a Patreon page. It's patreon.com/justshootitpod. It's a place where you can go and throw us a couple bucks a month if you're interested in helping us out. If you feel like you were getting anything useful out of this podcast, and it's great. If you give us $10 even once, you will get a Just Shoot It hat mailed to your house.
Speaking of mailing things to people's houses, I think listeners at home, if you are a patron and you elected to have a sticker sent to you and you didn't get a hat, you should probably have the sticker by now. So post it on Instagram. Let us know. I want to see it on the laptop or a computer case or camera case. Where else do people put stickers? A car, maybe? If you're not worried about
their
resale
shoulder.
value. Yeah,
under the mom tattoo.
Mm-hmm. On a skateboard deck if you're 15.
Oh, yeah, on your scooter.
1995. But yeah, show us those stickers. I think we're really excited to see them. A water bottle, actually. I put mine on a water bottle, and it was really nice. Not like a disposable one, like a Nalgene bottle.
And we are not responsible for any slowdowns in the U.S. Postal Service currently. So if you're interested in checking that out, go to patreon.com/justshootitpod. And now, here's our interview with Numa. We know you founded a streaming platform and you created shows and directed things. And, you worked with Issa Rae there and Lena Waithe and some other awesome people. But it seems to me like the thing that set you on course to where you are today over the past couple of years was probably your feature, Jezebel, that premiered at South by in 2019. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Although, my years and what I did at Black&Sexy TV set me up to do Jezebel. And a lot of that fan base were really eager to see what I would do in the feature space. So they really supported the film and helped a lot of the buzz for that film grow. So definitely not to be discounted. But as far as having a real signature for people to know what I'm about as a filmmaker and where my sensibilities lie more expansively, definitely my feature has done that and opened up so many doors because of that.
I have a follow-up question, actually, because I think this is something really interesting that, I think when people all were making web series, there was like a real moment in time where like web series felt like, this is maybe the future, right? We get to own our own content, tear down the gatekeepers, create an incredible calling card and build an audience, and then take that audience with you into your future. Having done web series myself, I feel like I've brought some of the viewers along with me, but it doesn't sound like to anywhere near the same success that you have. What did you do to kind of build that audience and then take them with you to your film?
Well, I really care about the community that cared about the work that I was doing. So I remained very engaged with them. I would hop on before our premieres and our finales and say hi to the fans, really engage in the comment section with them. And it was not just one web series, it was over a dozen. So a lot of our audience were seeing me over the years,
right.
And
you acted in
and it doesn't hurt to be an actor and star in one of the series because you get a whole fan base off of that and recognizability from people seeing you every week. So did a couple of seasons of a series, but all of the other series I worked on, I may have guest starred now and then, but I was directing, producing, show running. I was behind the scenes. But the web series I did star in, did have a lot of fans. Even to this day, there's still a group of fans from that really love that show. So those things help. Definitely being an on-camera talent always helps.
Sure.
They see your face. They become much more invested in you because they're getting more from you in a recognizable way.
So but also I maintained it, more
Yeah, but I cared.
All right, Numa, I'll star in your next movie. I'll do it.
Me too.
I mean that it's a real thing, and you notice the difference from filmmakers that put themselves in their work. They have that extra dimension, that extra factor of people staying close to them.
Yeah, I wonder if part of that Alfred Hitchcock Presents is a reason that he's one of the only directors we know from that era is because it wasn't like he was an actor per se. I mean, I think he did a little acting, but
he was a persona for sure.
Yeah.
And I feel like Spike Lee took from that. I don't know if he was inspired by that. I don't know if he's ever talked about that, but Spike Lee branded himself in that way.
Do you remember the trailer for She's Gotta Have It?
I don't.
It's incredible. It's
him talking about the movie?
He is on the street with a bunch of tube socks, and it's the only bit that's in color. He's like, hey, I'm Spike Lee. I got this new movie. I'm out here hustling, selling tube socks, but you got to watch this movie. She's Gotta Have It. It's my new movie. It's going to be incredible. Just like as charismatic. He's a 20-year-old dude. It's so good. And then, they
that's
cut
the
to...
trailer?
That's the trailer. And then they have some footage, and then they come back, and he's like, you got to go see this movie or I'm going to be out here. And it is so good. We will put it in the show notes.
Well, he's brilliant. He's a brilliant filmmaker and a brilliant marketer in that way, and, brilliant in advertising himself and advertising his work. And I think that, a lot of us can take a page from that. It's not for everybody, but it works, it works if it's for you.
Can we, just to rewind even a little bit more, Black&Sexy TV, you created it, and it was, how long were the episodes? Like, was it kind of like a Quibi style network?
Well, I created it with a team of filmmakers, like-minded filmmakers, and we started off with skits that were very short, maybe 5 minutes long. And then we did that for a little while, maybe a few months. And then we moved into serialized content, but still pretty short form. So episodes were always less than 10 minutes at first. But the audience became very impatient with that and growing with that. So we started lengthening, and everything was self-funded. So, the longer the episodes get, the more budget you need, because you need more days to do it, and you start just expanding the world. So then we went up to like 15-minute episodes, and finally we got to making full, we had real half-hour shows, 25-minute episodes, and we did feature films, and we just grew. But we started very short form, and just brick by brick built it to something bigger.
And how are you guys paying for everything?
So everything was self-funded. And in the beginning, it was just very, very scrappy.
Like that? Did you have like day jobs?
Different. Everyone was hustling different jobs, so like I would pick up a wardrobe styling gig or acting gig here. And then everyone was doing different things just to make it go right. But in the beginning, the budgets were really, we would spend maybe $200 on an episode just to buy lunch and maybe rent one lens and borrow a camera, and everything was natural lighting. We started that way. And then we did crowdfunding. And then we started charging for the season finales of our shows. So we would, really reel them in and then make them go pay for the season finale. And they were more than happy to. And we did crowdfunding. And then we moved off of YouTube and started our own pay site. So we became an official streamer, like Netflix, $7 a month. And we brought everyone with us, or a good portion. But that was over years of slowly building that up and gaining the trust of our audience and getting them addicted to the storylines and the characters and everything. So it took time, but it remained very independent because we were funded by our own community.
So the show, The Couple, you said that when you got a deal at HBO with that?
We did. So kind of how you were saying about the web series were in the early days, like the early days of YouTube, it was this space where everyone was trying out stuff, and you didn't have to wait and get a yes from someone else or go pitch your project or anything. You could just make your own thing and go. But a lot of executives got savvy about that and started looking on YouTube to find new talent, find new shows, but also to say, what's going on here? Like, how can we slow this down? Because this could overtake possibly what we're doing. And an executive came through and watched all the episodes of The Couple and reached out to us and brought us in for a development deal. and completely shelved the project.
Was it kind of like what they did with High Maintenance, where they found a web show they really loved and they wanted to adapt it to TV?
Yeah. And the question, it was like that. And the question of it was, how do you redo the format we had on YouTube for TV? And we didn't really feel like it had to be redone. But on TV, they want you to expand your worlds. And I think that's kind of how it ended up getting shelved, because the show The Couple was really just about a couple in an apartment. And we very rarely went outside of that apartment. And you very rarely saw other people in our lives. It was just about the two people. And that was the beauty of the show. And to take it and make it, something else was just making it something else. So I think just creatively, we struggled with figuring that out. But, to this day, the executives are like, we love it. We just don't know what to do with it, So, there'll be other things that I do with HBO. But that show just kind of went to TV heaven for now, or purgatory. But there's a lot of, you can still find episodes of it on, the archives of it are still on YouTube or Black&Sexy TV. If you want to check it out.
That's
it's very
cool.
fun.
It's a drama? Dramatic series?
It's a comedy. So it's about a couple who've just recently moved in together. And it's how they deal with how different it is now that they're living together, how much they get on each other's nerves. And, it's it's just about the mundane things of life, everyday life with this couple.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a TV show that is basically two people in a house. I know there's like The Affair. There's some shows that are very contained.
The Affair is huge. They have so many characters.
Yeah,
this was just me and my co-star Desmond Faison. It was just the two of us. And every now and then we do an episode where like his mom came to town, so there'd be three people, and that's how we were able to make these, very low budget. We shot everything in my apartment. I had great lighting, so we just basically were just using reflectors and stuff, and it was great. It felt so real. People thought we were a real couple, and we would lead them on and make them think that we were. Sometimes we would just never say if we were or weren't, but they really thought we were a real couple. That's how cinema verite it was, and I loved it. I think a show like that actually would do amazing on TV now, but I don't know that they'll pick it back up or revisit it. We'll see.
And so when HBO comes to you with like a deal like that, do they pay you to come to work on it with them?
Well, yeah, they have to. They have to, get the rights for your show, and they have to pay you to write, and they have to pay you. They have to do a deal, and they did, and you work on it, and then the thing with HBO is they only produce so many shows at a time. A lot of networks will produce a lot of pilots and then kind of choose from those pilots which ones go forward. HBO doesn't really do that. They really try to just only create a few, and those are usually the winners that go forward. They're not just like, let's just shoot a bunch and see what happens. So it's very intentional, and it's a very small circle of shows. At least that's how they used to run the house there. But it was very exciting for us, of course, but also something to look back on in terms of the difference between being independent and not. How when a major network like that comes to you, everything changes. You're not going to be able to do things the same way that you were before. Everything slows down because you have to go through all of these different channels. And though it's a great opportunity and an amazing thing, you're also kind of leaving your audience until you can redo the show for that network.
You can't keep making web series and also write a TV series at the same time.
And we were, because our show had, our company and the other shows we were doing had to keep going while we were trying to also, so it was interesting to kind of live in both worlds in that way and learn about the other side. But yeah, that was one of the things that happened.
It's interesting. I feel like I have a few different friends that had like production companies that were doing stuff and making a lot of their own things, and comedy and sketches and episodic stuff. And then they got one big deal. And they're like, we're putting everything else on hold.
Bye,
we're
everybody.
Got a pilot for NBC or VH1 or whatever. And then they put all their eggs in there, spend like a year on it. And they're like, yeah, we're not picking it up. And they're like,
yeah, that's rough. That's rough. And that's one of the maddening things, right? Is that, and again, speaking to what you were saying before about the digital space could have and can still be a space where you can go all the way with that. But when the big network comes to you, you're like, oh, this is more legitimate. Let me go over there.
Right.
You know, and also because like you want to eat better and live better and, you know, expand your career and your life. But it's like, interesting. It's kind of like in other industries when people have a new invention or a new product and the bigger company comes and just gobbles that thing up, you know, or buys you out before you can even fully launch your thing all the way you wanted to. So you never really know. It's kind of like an aborted, an aborted road. So that's, you know, something I think about a lot.
Yeah. I also wonder if it's even a tiny bit more complicated for you because, you know, it's your face in the show. You know, we were just talking about how like your audience has built a real meaningful relationship with you. And then, so, you know, it's not just like, oh, the kind of like the corporate entity of Black&Sexy TV has decided to sell out, quote unquote. It's, you know, not that you ever did, but, you know, like, or decided to go corporate or go to TV. You know, there were those wonderful fans can sometimes feel really protective of the,
like Left Behind
franchises.
There was a lot of that. And it was a conflict for me because I wanted to keep acting in my show. But of course I want to keep acting on my show on HBO if I can too, you know? So it was rough. And then after that, working on creating the other shows, I never starred in another show again because everyone knew me as that character and it felt so weird to put me in something else. So I was also really just missing acting and just missing, you know, being able to play in that way and, you know, satisfy that part of my artistry. So it just took some time to kind of come back around to where I'm at now. But that's part of the process that you go through when you say, yeah, we would like to develop something with HBO. It's going to take time, you know, although I was always kind of trying to get them to just take our series and just put it on TV.
Just put it on TV.
I promise if you do that, it'll be great.
Yeah. Maybe you can spend some money on a soundtrack if you want.
Yeah. Maybe if you want to remix the audio.
Yeah. I mean, you know, if they had a really, you know, daring executive or, you know, higher up team, they could have definitely done that. And it would have been very interesting to see where that went, but that was not, they weren't feeling that daring about doing it that way.
Well, can I just dig in on one little detail before we move on to Jezebel from Black&Sexy TV, which is, so you had a show that was produced by Issa Rae, Rumi Lover Friends, and obviously she had a web series that turned into a TV show on HBO called Insecure. What was the timing like? Like, did she produce the show for you before or after Insecure?
Before. So we kind of all were in the same circle. She was doing a really awesome web series called Awkward Black Girl on her YouTube channel while we were doing The Couple and other series. And we had a series called Rumi Lover Friends that we had filmed, but we had not put on YouTube yet. And she was in between seasons of Awkward Black Girl. So she asked us if she could put Rumi Lover Friends on her channel. Of course, we said yes. Her fan base was larger than ours at the time, and we wanted to collaborate. And so that's how she ended up being a producer on the show. So it was something that we had already shot and wrote, and it was ready to go. But once we put it on her channel, she put her name behind it, that expanded that audience. And it was good for her because she needed more content on her channel. So the same way that YouTubers will collaborate and go on each other's channel to boost each other. And, you know, it's a win-win for both sides. That's what we did with our web series. This was years before Awkward Black Girl was brought to HBO. So Awkward Black Girl was brought to HBO, and then through the development process, which took a couple of years, so she was going through the same thing, the long process, it became Insecure. And it retained some of the essence of Awkward Black Girl, but it became its own thing. And
do you think, was there any relation to HBO finding Awkward Black Girl and then finding the couple?
Oh, of course. They're all the executives that it's their job to go out and find talent. They were all hearing about Black&Sexy TV and hearing about Awkward Black Girl. And
Numa, you're making me I'm so nostalgic for that time.
Yeah, right? I actually really miss it. And it's like YouTube is still there. We could still be doing that.
Yeah.
And so that's not something that I take lightly. I think about it a lot. And like, I'm thinking about some things,
Sure.
Well, so what's interesting to me, and it's a theme that I really kind of try to come back to on this show a lot, because I think it's important for new filmmakers to realize that part of the perseverance to becoming like a working director is you did all this stuff for no money. You started a network. You started these shows with your friends. You were doing acting gigs and styling gigs and all these things to pay for these super low budget things. Then one of them turns into an HBO show, in development, and you started a streaming network. You're paid. You're show running. You're writing. You're directing. You're acting. Trying to probably have life outside of film too, maybe a tiny bit. And somehow amidst all of that, you decide to write so I watched your movie Jezebel. I loved it on Netflix, but it seems like it's a very contained movie. Most of it takes place in 2 locations. It has a relatively small cast. It's a drama, and it seems like you probably were at this place where you're talking to HBO, you have all these things, huge cast, access to a lot of equipment and cool things and locations, but you kind of decided to put all that stuff that was filling up your world on hold and focus on this really small, what seems personal movie, right? I think it's based on things from your own life, right?
Yeah, it was a real process. Aside from starring in The Couple and writing, show running, directing, I was every single day I was in some form of production. So I was either in a writing room, in pre-production, on set, looking at an edit, managing the release and the fans and the comments and, social media of that every single day for years. There were no breaks. There was no vacation. Every Sunday that episode had to come out, and I'm saying all of that. And there were people that were working even harder than me on the team that weren't sleeping, to get these episodes out. I was sleeping, but I was working really hard and always in one of those stages of production. But I started to really want to make a feature film and really want to direct something personal to me that was my signature and my story solely.
It feels immediate or apparent to you too, right? You're like, oh, if you're shooting and cranking out all this content every day for years, 90 minutes? Are you kidding me? That sounds like a vacation.
That's exactly how I felt about it. I said, I'm doing this every single day. Why am I not making a feature? And part of the reason I wasn't making a feature was because we had no breaks. When was I going to have time to go make this feature? And is this feature going to be part of Black&Sexy TV, or is it going to be this other thing? Will I be able to work with some of the same cast and crew, or will they be too busy, being on set and on those shows? It was really figuring out how to carve out just the time, to be able to do that and still keep everything running. And then we had a unprecedented 2-week hiatus where we ended up having a sponsor. The AIDS Healthcare Foundation started sponsoring some of our shows and wanted us to go to South Africa for 2 weeks for a big project that they were doing. And they wanted some of our stars and people to go to South Africa to be part of that. And we agreed to do it, which meant we were going to have 2 weeks off. And so instead of going to South Africa, I said I could make my film during this time. And again, I'm like, it's totally possible to make a feature film in 2 weeks because we do this stuff every freaking day, And so since we had the 2-week hiatus, I was our equipment was freed up, our crew was freed up, so I could bring the DP who I liked working with most. I could bring, people over because I'm like, I know it's supposed to be your 2 weeks off, but I want to make this feature. Are you down? And none of us had made a feature film before, so everyone was so excited. And I said, we're also going to go to Las Vegas to do it. So it was just like a no-brainer.
Wait. You are the living epitome of just shooting it, right?
Yeah. But can we back? I want to back up just to examine the thinking for a minute, because Matt and I disagree on this a lot. Matt, I think probably because Matt went to film school and I didn't, but he feels like making a feature is like a really important part of being a working filmmaker. And I feel like a lot of times, and people email us all the time and say like, I want to do this feature, I want to do this, I'm not sure what I should do. I kind of feel like making a feature is, you spend 2 years on it and it could very easily do absolutely nothing for your career,
Sure. But you don't have to explain to anyone, especially your parents, but like, Hollywood, what a feature is. And they knew, especially back then, people didn't even know what series were.
It wasn't back then. How many years ago? You made that feature like 3 years ago, right?
Oh, I made my feature in 2017, and it came out last year.
But still, like, there's no stigma on a feature. You know what I mean? Digital content.
I have to agree with you. For all the work we were doing and for all the amazing fan base that we have, it was still kind of like no real respect.
Well, but the HBO deal was respect. Like, I guess what made you say, instead of saying 2 weeks, let me take a break, or 2 weeks, let me make another show that I'll bring to HBO, you said, like, how did you know that this is the movie you need to make? And then
I knew for years, and I had wrote part of it before I even launched Black&Sexy TV. So I always had this story of my true life story. I always knew I wanted to make it into a movie. I just didn't know how those pieces were going to come together, because I didn't know how movies came together. I hadn't even made a short film when I had the idea that Jezebel should be a movie. I lived the life. I was the cam girl for like 1 to 2 years. I came to LA. I got into an acting class. There were directors in that acting class. We started making short films kind of within that school format. And I fell in love with directing and finally started understanding, this is how movies actually come together, because I only really knew the on-camera side of it. So then I started making short films, started doing Black&Sexy TV, but all the while in the back of my head, I'm like, I want to make a feature one day. And I saw people like Barry Jenkins, who you mentioned earlier. It's like, we came up with him. We were, when he was at South by, we were at Sundance with our movie. He was at South by with his first feature. We were at Sundance with A Good Day to Be Black and Sexy, which is the base of Black&Sexy TV. And I just saw how not only with him, but with some of my other peers, that once they made their feature film, that did change the trajectory of their career. So as much as I love everything that I was doing, I knew that for me, it would be a turning point. And I think that that's just a very kind of individual way of looking at it. And maybe I created that reality for myself, but I always knew that and felt strongly that when I make my feature film, it will be very apparent to people where my sensibilities lie, what control I have over my craft, what this story is. A feature is different than short form.
And was there something in like the topic, that making it a movie about a slice of your own life, that you felt confident was the right move, as opposed to making like a horror film or a comedy, which you had just done so much comedy? I knew that it had to be Jezebel, because it's a story no one else could tell. It's a story nobody else lived. You couldn't make it up if you tried, you could say, I'm going to make a movie about a black cam girl, but you would be missing out on so many details of
the texture that
the details, all the specifics I know about it, everything that was going on in the full world of my life,
and it's a period piece, which is puts a hint of genre into a drama, right?
Yeah, a little bit. And I like that I definitely would call it a drama, but it kind of is on, it's a fringe, I would call it a bit of a fringe, drama, because, it's, part erotic, part, it mostly goes under the drama category.
Can you give us the log line just for listeners that might
what do I say about Jezebel?
I can try to come up with a log line if you want.
Yeah, no, you come up with the log line.
Usually I do this and then people are like, no, that you didn't know what the movie was.
No, I want you to do it. Do it.
So it is about a black cam girl, but it's more about a girl living with her sister who is trying to find a way to make money and survive and, write a purpose and a community in Las Vegas. Did you really live in Las Vegas?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There is like this real air of truth of what it's like to live in Las Vegas but not be there as a tourist, like the non-touristy side of Las Vegas. And she finds out that there's this opportunity to be a cam girl. She goes on camera and people log in through their modems or whatever they did back in
their dial-up,
the 90s,
baby. That dial-up.
2000s. Yeah. Usually men, right, are watching these girls on camera and they can't even hear them. They have to type to each other. And actually, one of the things that I find most entertaining about that movie is the technicalities of how you were a cam girl back then, because there's a lot of tricks. It's like, if you move like this, it looks like you're doing a certain sexual act that you're actually not really doing. Or if I move the paddle like this, it looks like I'm spanking you, but really I'm like a foot away from you. But from the camera angle, it works. And so there's all that fun of
it's a funny, like almost like a filmmaker trick, right?
Yes, it's a movie magic. And
that's fun.
I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I'm like, oh, this is me as a very early filmmaker. It's where I learned about cameras.
It's the first
It's
special
where I
effect.
learned about angles. I learned about lighting. And I learned about the digital space. I mean, this was, the early days of the internet. And I learned about how do you connect to someone, how we're connecting right now, and that's actually a skill set. That's actually, there's talent to that, being able to do that, being able to connect and reach through the screen and pull through the screen. And all of that ended up, of course, I just would always laugh and say, of course, I ended up being part of a network called Black&Sexy TV. Of course, I ended up doing this, because my very early influences and my first kind of discovery even about all kinds of things involved with sexuality and fantasies and what you might like and what you're repulsed by and, what it means to connect to someone in such an intimate way and be vulnerable too. All of that is a part of my filmmaking and part of my signature as an artist. And it really all started all the way back then. I'm kind of in awe of that when I really think about it.
Yeah, it's a perfect way to forge an independent filmmaker, right? Like you have this unique insight into humanity, right? And an understanding of how to connect with people in a very intimate, but again, unique way. Then a boot camp of just like getting those 10,000 hours of like shooting, knowing what it's like to be in front of and behind the camera nonstop. And then it feels totally approachable to go ahead and just bang out a movie real quick on your vacation.
Yeah,
no big deal.
It really did. Even though I discovered in the making of it that, making a feature is not like making a long short. Your post-production is going to be way longer. The control of your craft has to be sustained in a much richer way. And I do feel that it's an elevated art form in that way because it's such a marathon. And I was definitely used to doing those quick sprints, turn it around, put it out Sunday, turn it around, put it out Sunday, where you would make quicker decisions in a way and say, well, it's okay, fix that real quick, cut, boom, boom, put it out. Whereas your feature, you have to sit with that thing, even after you've shot everything that's in your script or everything you could shoot, then you have to really sit just like with a short, but much more control over going through all of that footage and going, really carving out your final product. And I learned that in post. I was like, oh, this is not going to be a quick turnaround at all. I don't even know if I have a movie. I think I don't have a movie at all. I think I have something horrible, and slowly, getting it to that point.
Can I ask, were there things that you wish you had done differently? Like, is there anything you would have told yourself at the top of the feature that to warn yourself about something?
I wish, I had been more organized about certain things. I wish I knew how much insurance was going to cost. In the actual filmmaking, I don't have any regrets. I don't. There were tough decisions that I had to make, but I'm very happy with all the choices that I made. But the things that I learned were, whoa, post-production will really take you down. It's going to challenge you in so many ways to really see it through and not quit. And I think other filmmaker friends of mine have expressed the same thing, that it was in the post-production and just the uncertainty of even knowing where your film is going to land. It's really can be really trying. And that's something that I didn't expect, because I always knew where all of my episodes were going to land. They're going to land on Black&Sexy TV on Sunday at 7, And it's like, you really are kind of walking through the dark in a way. Even if you have your script and are super prepared, it's still a bit scary.
Yeah. Can I ask, what do you wish you had organized better on the business side?
Can you tell that Matt just finished shooting a movie and is
I did just finish shooting.
Okay, I'll help you.
Yeah. So and the listeners at home,
and the listeners,
what are they worried about?
He's talking to all filmmakers.
And it's funny because I knew this from Black&Sexy TV. I knew this. You don't start anything without all of your paperwork in order, but for some reason there were just a couple of agreements that I just, said, oh, we'll get to it later. It's going to be okay.
Right.
We got to go. We got to make this thing. We have all the actors, so we're good, but no, don't forget people. Don't forget anybody, and don't think that it's just going to be okay, because you've got a long way to go. Feelings change. Perception changes, shit changes, and just have it organized, because when you do sell your movie, a distributor does come on board, you're going to have so much stress trying to deliver everything to them that's a whole other pocket of post-production that's such a headache. And in the midst of being so excited that you have a distributor, you're like, oh, but am I actually going to be able to meet their standards so that my film does air on Netflix, next month or whatever. Right. So,
did you have to shoot in 4K for it to be on Netflix, or does that not matter?
Yeah, we did. I don't know if that's their deliverable across the board.
I can answer that, actually. For their originals, all have to be 4K, but acquisitions don't technically have to master in 4K.
Okay.
There
because for the longest
There's
time,
levels to this. There's levels.
You can't shoot a Netflix show on Alexas because they only shoot 3.2K, and it's what?
So the trick is, be like Numa, have a festival hit, then get acquired. You can master however you want, but you still have all those deliverables that are, pretty heavy duty, right?
Yeah, and even just having your film, ready for closed captioning and all the, those are things that you cannot do without. You can't do. You have to have your insurance going in, and then you have to have your insurance going out. And if you don't have the money for that, and you didn't get the advance that you wanted to get, you're going to be scrambling to make that happen too. And it's not a thing that anyone's going to let you slide on, so, try to have your ducks in a row. And not every first time producer is going to be ready for all that. And you as the filmmaker, you're going to end up being your producer too. You have to carry that thing across the finish line. And so these are things that people told me too, but you just don't until you're really in it. And there's so much going on, and you're also trying to just be an artist and make the beautiful film that you want to make. The excitement of that can have you leaving things to the side. Get your ducks in order. But I know I'm saying that, and first-time filmmakers, there's still going to be stuff that you don't do. Hopefully your producer is more experienced than you are.
Yeah. I know we're running a little short on time, but I just want to jump into you mentioned the art and the craft of the filmmaking a little bit. I remember when I did, you talked about how you'd done so many web series and shorts and everything, but a feature is just different. I remember when I did my first feature, I had done also a bunch of web series and episodic things and shorts and, viral videos and everything. But when we were figuring out how to shoot this movie, my DP, the cinematographer, says, so what's the cinematic language of this? Like, how do we cover a scene? Like, what's our approach and our strategy? And I was like, I was not sure what he was talking about, And there is, because you're saying the longevity of the movie, you have to kind of have an idea of how you're going to shoot the movie so that the first scene and the last scene feel like they're from the same movie. And what I think you did really well in your movie is, now that I know that you shot it in 2 weeks and kind of on this very short break that you had, and you had to travel your crew also, it seems like you turned your limitations into artistic decisions, right? So
I absolutely did, and that's partly style and partly circumstance, but I was used to being able to do that. You have to turn things on a dime. If you lose a location, you might have to lose the scene. And if you lose the scene, how do you make that work for you? There's a couple of scenes in my film, in my script, that we didn't shoot because we didn't have the budget to find a hospital that I felt was going to actually feel like a real hospital and feel right. So I started debating with myself, do we need a hospital scene? And after long debate with myself about it, I said, no, we don't need a hospital scene. As a matter of fact, that's kind of exploiting my mother's death in a way. And it became a creative choice to leave that out. There is another scene that I wrote for a funeral. Again, we were having trouble finding the right location for that, and we had run out of money. And I said, do I need the funeral scene? And I came to the decision, don't need it. Going to the funeral all dressed in black is stronger than what I wrote, even though I loved that scene that I wrote and I hated to take it away from the actor who was going to perform it. But it was actually better to just see us silently in black on a bus. That told the story more. And my roots as a short filmmaker have always been nonlinear in the experimental space. And I really wanted to find a way to add that to Jezebel. I didn't want to just make a film that there's no way it was going to feel like every other coming of age, but a lot of coming of age stories have a funeral, a death of a parent, a hospital scene. So I ended up being really okay with letting that go. And it feels like it continues the thread of my work, which is to not show and say everything, to exercise restraint in a lot of ways. So, but those decisions were motivated by lack of budget, lack of time. And then I quickly was able to spin that into a creative choice.
Yeah, and that's, I think, the strength of a really crafty, clever filmmaker is how do you take those limitations and turn them into advantages? Like, you have this sequence of scenes, this one location where the cam girls are waiting to be selected for a camming session. And I think the way most people would have shot that scene is they're looking at a monitor, you shoot coverage, you kind of shoot different angles so you can cut it together, but the way you shot it all in one direction, and it felt very intentional and artistic, and it was a cool way, even just the way you cover scenes. If every time I'm in this location I'm going to shoot it the same way, it starts becoming like a motif, and so I thought there was some cool things. And I know most of our listeners probably haven't seen the movie yet, and this is a kind of a specific question, but I did notice one thing which I thought was kind of interesting that I wanted to ask you about, is all of the scenes that take place in the apartment. I could be wrong about this, but it seemed like they were all shot from kind of sitting level eye height, as opposed to the camera always seemed low. And I know people are sitting, but even when they're standing, the camera seemed to kind of be looking up at them. Was that an intentional thing or just something I read into?
Yeah, very intentional. I was very intentional since we basically just had the two locations. So I wanted each location because that's how my life was. I had two locations in my life. It was that apartment, which we shot in the same apartment that I lived in. That's why it feels so real, because that is where I was living with my family. So me and my cinematographer, Brent Johnson, we had long talks about this. So everything in the apartment was always supposed to feel shadowy. It's very low ceilings in there anyhow. So you're not going to get, you know, this high angle shot. And I wanted it to be down low because that's how we were. We were depressed and down low and just wanted the camera to be on our level. You know, we were often, you know, sitting and either on the bed or the couch, the two pieces of furniture there. You know, you didn't have, you know, these views or anything like that. The curtains were always completely pulled. You weren't looking outside onto any terrace or anything like that. You know, was a very closed in space and a dark, shadowy space. So the palette of that was very different than the chat rooms. And the idea there was, again, to stay low, stay intimate, and let the work with the shadows. You know, we never tried to blow out any shadow. We always tried to keep the real shadows falling where they were falling. And then when we go to the chat room scene, I wanted everything there to be garish and fluorescent and, you know, the colors that women think are women's colors, you know, the purples and the pinks. And, you know, to really have that trashy, cheap, you know, we just rented this office last week and we're throwing these girls in here, you know, that skeeviness, that underbelly of Las Vegas. And for me, coverage is something I don't like anyhow. I would get in trouble when I would direct things at Black&Sexy. It's like, you didn't get enough coverage of this or that. And I'm like, we didn't need it. You know, it's always like a little bit of a fight. In the first few episodes that I ever directed, I just, in my short film work, I just didn't do coverage. I just shot what I wanted to see. So I was trying to translate that for our version of TV, right? And then in the film, I wanted everything to feel like you are actually watching. You are behind your computer watching these girls. So you're not going to get all those angles. You're just going to get the one angle. That also saved us a lot going So I'm very impatient when I shoot. I don't want to shoot the scene 10 times to get 10 different angles. And I'm only going to use maybe 3 in the cut. I don't like a lot of cuts. So if I don't shoot a lot of footage, we're not going to get a lot of cuts. So a lot of it was like all very efficient, very economic, but also just style and patience, you know, of we don't need to see all that. And sometimes I would have to kind of meet in the middle because my cinematographer is like, no, you're definitely going to need that. And I'm like, no, I'm pretty sure, confident that I don't need to see the other side or at all, you know, but I would give it to him, you know, sometimes. And sometimes he was right and I did end up using it. But sometimes I knew and I followed through with it in the edit. I'm not going to use that. I'm just getting it because my actor feels they need it. And my cinematographer is going to go crazy if I don't get it, you know. But I knew in my head, I already know I'm not going to use that, you know. So it's, I think, a combination of all those things. It's almost like survival filmmaking has become a style for me. So
wow. And then you got into South by.
Yeah,
movie.
We sure did.
And is that how the Ava DuVernay array deal came to be? Did she find it at South by?
No, but we sent it to her company. We sent it to the team there and they reviewed it and loved it. And it's a team of Black women there who get it, you know, and they really, you know, wrap their whole arms around a project when they love it. And so that's what they did. But with South by, it was interesting because I submitted the film. We filmed in July of 2017, and I was racing to make, you know, all the major deadlines. So, you know, Sundance deadline is September. I was like, we're not going to make a Sundance deadline. That's insane, you know. And the South by deadline is in November. That was still insane, but I still submitted what we had, which was not a film. It was an assembly, a 2-hour assembly of like scenes. And so, of course, it didn't get in, you know, for 2018, but I still had the audacity to be upset, you know, about that. But I needed to keep working on the film. The film wasn't done. So it went from that 2 hours and something to the 88 minutes that it is now. And it got in the next year.
That's great, though, because I feel like it would be easy to lose heart, lose confidence, right? And just imagine, well, I blew my shot with them. We'll try for a different festival, right? How did it feel to get accepted that time around?
I couldn't believe it. And because there have been so many no's in different ways, not just from festivals, from like, oh, well, maybe I should just try to just take this out to a distributor now. We'll skip the festivals. We could do that. Like, no, that wasn't working. I was like, shit. You know, as a filmmaker, you feel all this pressure to deliver good news to your team because it's everyone's starry-eyed and it's your first thing and everyone wants it to go well and everyone wants to have that success story. So it was a year of depression while being in post and hiding. I really wouldn't go to certain things where I thought I would run into cast or crew because I just couldn't talk about the movie. I couldn't talk about where I thought it was. Ooh, what do everyone's looking at you like you're the ticket,
What's the news? Yeah. Numa, how's it going?
I'm telling you, for a year, I avoided every single person that I could avoid. And when I finally had to see some of them, I was just like, try to make myself as small as possible. So please don't ask me about the movie. We're still working, So when I got the email from them, I was in shock. Just remembering it, I just feel the shock again. I started pacing. I was alone. I started pacing around my desk and I said, this isn't real. This isn't real. This isn't real. I must have said, this isn't real like 50 times. And then sat down and looked at the email again, like, yeah.
That's a good.
Oh my God.
That's a good image.
Oh my God. Just the relief was.
That image of you pacing around your desk saying, this isn't real is a good image for people to remember. Because I feel like if you wrote that into like a movie scene where something amazing happens to a character and they pace around their desk saying this isn't real over and over, people would be like, people would never do that. But then they do that. So.
Yeah, I definitely did that. And then I called our lead actress, Tiffany Tennille, and we cried on FaceTime together. It was just so much buildup and we knew that going to a festival, because we were ready. We were like, once we get in, wherever we're going, we're going to milk that shit and we're going to blow this movie out.
Did you get a publicist?
I did. We had been kind of our own publicist along the way. I was always promoting the film, but I definitely brought someone on to do the things that I couldn't do, and they made sure that we got our review in the Hollywood Reporter. I didn't know anyone there, but I was definitely getting a lot of buzz going. So it was a good collaboration, but I would definitely advise to get a publicist when you go, because they'll do all the follow-up for you and all the extra reach out. And it's money well spent.
Yeah. And I think the other thing you just said that's important to know is it is a team job between you and the publicist. It's not like they're going to do everything because they don't know your project nearly as well as you do. They're
going to amplify your work. You should already be your own publicist when you start making your film.
And then you sold the movie and got to direct your first TV episode, right? Like Queen Sugar was your first kind of big TV gig, right?
Yeah, well, it was really awesome because Ava DuVernay pays attention. She pays attention to Black women filmmakers and women filmmakers across the board. And when you step forward and make a feature film, you may be fortunate enough to get an invitation to come direct on Queen Sugar. So she actually reached out to me on Twitter. She slid in my DMs. It wasn't totally cold because I've known Ava over the years, but I hadn't seen her in a very long time, not since, all of her huge milestones and accomplishments. I hadn't seen her in many years. But she was aware of Black&Sexy TV, definitely aware of my work, had tweeted out one of my fundraisers for Jezebel early on. So she was tracking the film and keeping up with what I was doing. And yeah, there was a lot of buzz around the film. She slid in the DM. She invited me to Queen Sugar. I cried again. It's like two big crying moments was South by and when Ava invited me to direct Queen Sugar. And I pretty much went from the festival to New Orleans to go direct. It was back to back.
Wow.
So I was like on fire.
Were you nervous about doing like it's a Hulu show, right? Queen Sugar?
It's the Oprah Winfrey Network. So it's on OWN.
I've seen it on Hulu.
Oh, it's also it's licensed on Hulu now. So you can catch up with it there too. Yeah, of course I was nervous, but my excitement was bigger than me being nervous. And I was able to shadow the director before me. So the biggest part of that was really learning how to prep for TV, which is very different than the way I had prepped for anything in my life, So I really paid attention to that part in the shadowing that I did. And because I felt pretty good, like once I'm on set, I'm good because I've been on set almost every day for 8 years, So it's just a bigger set, more people. But how you prep and how you communicate with that team of 100+ people is really what makes or breaks you as a TV director. And I think, when you shadow, that's what you got to pay attention to.
But also, the past 8 years, you're kind of the boss, and now you're like the guest on someone else's show. It's probably...
You're the guest and the boss at the same time. Yeah. And it's just, you're kind of like, hey, I'm here. Because I remember my first shooting day, first scene up, I had to make a decision as a director that was a decision I would have easily made at Black&Sexy TV about how we were going to shoot the first scene. And in TV, you do a lot more rehearsal with your actors before you shoot. In the web series land, you shoot the rehearsal.
Shoot rehearsals, yeah.
You don't rehearse, you shoot, Yeah. And so, but you can't just take people's rehearsal away from them. So you have to figure that thing out. And we had a cast member who wasn't ready. And I knew on my first day, my number one thing, besides, doing the best job I could do, was to make my day, to not go over, not even a second over the 12 hours. So I already knew going in. So I'm like, the actor is not here, but we're ready. And when the actor gets here, they're going to want to rehearse. We're not rehearsing, I was just like, we're not going to have time we're literally not going to have time. Thankfully, I knew that actor. I had met the actor before. We had a good rapport. So when they showed up on set, I let them know right away, hey, you're going to go over this super quick. It's not going to be a rehearsal like what you're used to. We need to shoot. I need you to just sit right there and we're going to shoot. So just review it real quick and let's go. And it was a moment. The actor was fine with it, but the team was like, what's going on? And I'm like, trust me, we have to do it this way. And the actor was also okay, not just because we knew each other, but because they took so long to get to set that they were, they were okay.
Yeah, kind of on them.
I had a little bit of leverage.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when we finished 5 minutes early, everyone was high-fiving me, and it was like, it was, after that, they trusted me. But the fact that I had to do that on the first scene was like, they're really going to think I'm trying to be in here, changing up shit. I'm not. I'm trying to make our day. I really want everyone to get out of here on time. And then I lived up to that. It was like chef's kiss.
And did you shoot coverage?
You have to shoot your coverage. I was always trying to get out of it. I was like, but do we really need that? And our cinematographer is like, yes, we always get that shot. We're going to get it. There was one scene where I did not shoot coverage and everyone was upset with me about it. Even later, they were still upset, but I don't regret it at all because it was the perfect. It was the last scene we were shooting that day. And it was another thing where we were going to go over. So I just made a decision. We're just going to shoot it here and here. We're not going to shoot it here, 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 and here, right. And it was fine. It's one of my favorite moments awesome. In that episode. But that there was tension with that, you have to be able to navigate that. So you are their guest, absolutely. And you have to respect everyone. I'm coming in on the 4th season and I give them all the respect, but they're also not going to respect you if you don't take control and make your days. So that's the tension.
Yeah, there you go.
And was that did you get into the DGA off of that gig?
I did. I joined after that. So I'm a member. I'm in the old boys club now.
Nice. And now you have a feature with Gabrielle Union for Netflix. Is next up if this pandemic ever ends.
Exactly. We're hoping to shoot early next year. But again, we're just kind of rolling with the punches. But that definitely came out of doing a feature because it didn't come out of doing the web series. It's just that people sit up a little taller when you've done a feature and they're like, oh, we might be able to trust this woman with something. So
it seems kind of like it's triangulated, right? You did a feature. You played South by. Ava's on your side. She asked you to do Queen Sugar. They're happy with that. Your DGA. Plus, you've had some history with HBO. Like, some people in town. And then who comes first, you or Gabrielle Union on this feature?
Gabrielle Union came first. So she was already attached to the project. It's based on a book. And she's producing now as well. So I think her team found the book, an option. I'm not sure exactly how that all came together, but there was already a script based on that book. She was already attached. So I got the script. I liked it.
And this is through by this point, I'm assuming you have like a pretty good agent and manager and stuff, right?
Since the Black&Sexy TV days, UTA was representing the company. So, any moves that we were trying to make as a company with our shows, I was already represented at UTA, but I deepened that relationship by having my own agent for acting. And then I didn't make Jezebel with any of them knowing about it. I just went and did it the same way we were always doing the web series. And then when it was done, I told them, because I had a manager at the time that didn't think it was a good idea. And I ended up letting him go. But it kind of made me gun shy to talk to my agents about it. And so I just did it. And then when it was done, I brought it to them. And so now I'm represented. Like, I have all these agents because they're like, oh, we didn't know that you could do all of these things. So everything changed.
But that's such a good thing to prove both of your points, Matt and Numa, of like, you running this company for 8 years, you've done all this stuff, you get this HBO deal, you are starring, you're writing, you're creating, you're show running, and they still don't realize that you could do all this stuff until Ava DuVernay's like, this is a good movie. Or
because it's not reaching them in that way, even if we had hundreds of thousands of fans, which we did and do, they're not in that fan group, so they don't know the impact that you're making until it reaches their circles, which is a totally different circle. So it is the triangulation is happening, but every opportunity that I have is because I made something of my own. There's not one opportunity that isn't that or directly related to that. And once I clicked into, that's just my path. That's my path. Everything that I do that's just me, so I didn't worry too much about it, but it was pretty amazing to see, the team of agents like swarm down.
Yeah, now you've got a boardroom of people. Yeah.
I have a team, I never had a team before. And so now I have this team, and that team, they're always looking out for me things. So that's how the script for Perfect Find came, that Gabrielle Union was already attached to. And then it's up to me to go prove myself, I'm the one to do it. And that was a series of meetings and me letting them know my take on it, like what I plan to do with it. I ended up doing a rewrite on the script as well. And then everyone was really happy with it. So we're making a movie now.
Wow.
And it's really awesome. But I remember in one of the final meetings, they asked me how I was going to handle the jump from doing such a lo-fi thing to it's not a massive budget, but it's a lot,
Yeah.
It's a lot of figures. And that was kind of a question that I wasn't expecting, but I felt I answered well. And maybe sealed the deal for me getting the job, which is just basically that it's the same thing with more zeros. You're still, no film ever feels like they have enough money.
Right.
So even if this is, a $20 million film, you're still fighting for what you want to be able to shoot everything that's on your pages and get everybody you want in the way that you want. It's the same thing. But yeah, that's been the path.
Yeah. Well, Numa, you'll have to come back when your next movie is out.
Yeah.
I will.
It's exciting to hear. And it's that question is like, I still haven't figured out if it's a valid question or not, because some of the best work I've seen is from people who have been making their own art forever and then got a lot of money to take a leap, and I was
offended by the question when it was asked.
You were offended?
And because I was in the meeting and it wasn't a green light yet and they're still assessing me, I had to really think on my toes, and answer, and maybe I was also being tested with like, is this when her anger or whatever is going to come out? I had to hold my ground, but inside I was feeling like, why, like, don't ask me that, but I can see more than one side of it, but it was definitely something that came up.
I would bet that person hasn't ever made a film themselves.
The person that asked the question.
The person that asked the question.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like you
like, no comment. I cannot speak any further on this.
Hey, listen, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Yeah. I'm sure that person is very nice, but as filmmakers, we know that, like, as things scale up, yes, they become more complicated in some ways and they become easier in other ways, and those skills were always going to transfer, right?
It's so true. And on Queen Sugar, one of the producers there told me they would much rather have an indie filmmaker come work on the show because we know how to roll with the punches, because actually, and TV is closer to indie filmmaking than you would think, because you're losing locations and you have such a short time to turn the thing around. It was the closest thing to what I had already been doing, just a much bigger budget, a lot more, instead of, 6 people on set, you've got 60, 70, 80, 100 people, but it was the same thing, which is why I wasn't that nervous, because I knew what I was doing there.
Cool. Yeah, well, awesome. Well, we're excited. Do you have like a personal social media presence that people can follow to see, like, keep up with your stuff?
Yes. Everything is at Miss Numa. So MISSNUMA. That's Twitter and Instagram. If you're on Facebook, just search my name, Numa Perrier, and my page will pop up. But I'm most active on Instagram and Twitter. Pretty responsive. So reach out to me. I love hearing about your thoughts on the movie, good or bad. # Jezebel movie. Go watch Jezebel on Netflix.
Cool. And I want to give a shout out to Lena Green also, who introduced us to you.
Yes,
who
thank
also
you,
listens
Lena.
to the podcast and is a filmmaker.
And Lena Green,
and actor.
fabulous actress and filmmaker. So, and great friend.
Well, are you cool with hanging out with us just for a couple more minutes for an unpaid endorsement?
Oh, yeah. I have something for that. Mm-hmm.
Unpaid endorsement. So my endorsement is a YouTube video called The Secrets to Creating an Indie Game Franchise. It's a keynote speech from the Game Developers Conference from, I think, 2018. So the Game Developers Conference is like, the big video game like convention, basically. So anybody who's in that business, they all get together and there's keynote speakers and they roll out all sorts of stuff. It's not like a trade show. It's not like E3 or something like that. It's not like, hey, the new Call of Duty game is out. It's like really nerdy. It's about like game theory and stuff. And that specific panel talks a ton about the ways in which you can engage an audience through your traditional storytelling, but also through meaningful kind of like extra transmedia ways of talking to people, whether that's Twitter or maybe that's a comic book, or all of the different philosophies behind that, and not just making it marketing, but making it meaningful on how to follow through on the promise of your content. And I thought this is just such an incredible speech for independent filmmakers who are looking to connect with their audience. I was like, oh, this is great.
What's it called again?
It is called The Secrets to Creating an Indie Game Franchise. It's so nice when you see like a speech or a podcast or something like that that is directly applicable to filmmaking but isn't actually about filmmaking. It's just like, it just blows your mind. So that's my endorsement.
Good endorsement.
Yeah, thanks. Numa, what you got?
Well, off of what you said, just today, there was a whole, David Fincher started trending with this photograph of Jared Leto and his hair and cornrows. And apparently, Mr. David did the cornrows himself, which had Black Twitter in particular and film Twitter and the cross-section of Black film Twitter up in an uproar. And going down the rabbit hole of that, I discovered that on Gone Girl, the director's commentary, apparently he's ripping Ben Affleck to shreds about not wanting to wear a Yankees hat. And that production was shut down for several days over this. And there were negotiations that were going down. I said, is this a joke? But no, it's real. So apparently everyone needs to go back and watch Gone Girl with the commentary to get all the gossip, all the tea spilt on the tense working relationship. He was calling him unprofessional. He said, this character, I want him to wear this hat. And there was just a whole days of negotiations around what he would wear on his head as the character. Was it that he was just, is he a Sox fan? Is that what it is? Yeah, he's a Boston boy. That runs deep in the blood, apparently.
I guess it does.
Even when you're playing a character who is not you, sir, and being, paid very handsomely to do so, and your director is telling you to do so. Okay. So I just found that to be very fascinating. And now I've just got to watch that film with the commentary just to, apparently that's not the only story throughout this commentary. And so there's a thread on Twitter, people are talking about how he just keeps ripping him to shreds on there. And I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy.
That sounds pretty good. Also, Ben Affleck's a director himself. Like, imagine if someone on Argo was like, I don't think my character would wear this tie.
Yeah.
And
well, Gone Girl is him after
he was
Argo.
Playing Argo, wasn't he?
Yeah, that's true.
That is crazy.
No shade, Ben. Rooting for you, but definitely gonna watch Gone Girl again with those goggles on.
Yeah.
So
David Fincher, I don't think there can be the stuff he does for you hear about him doing is like no one else could do that nowadays because
no one gets away with it.
Yeah. And do you know that house in Gone Girl, like, it's all on a stage it's all green screen, all the windows, and it's like the visual effects that they did to just show like the driveway out front. It's like if you look up VFX breakdown for Gone Girl, it's like every shot is a VFX shot, and it looks like it's just a
I did not know that.
Yeah.
See, now I actually really love that film. I'm gonna watch it again. But I'd never heard the commentary. And always thought mostly about that story and had a lot of conversations around the story, but never really thought about the filmmaking of that film that much. So definitely going to revisit.
Well, I have two things. They're both very short. One, this is... I just cannot stop talking about how I switched from Mac to PC recently, and tens and thousands of other creative people that are doing graphics and 3D graphics and visual effects are doing it because Apple is a horrible company in terms of like the relationships that they make with other people in the tech space, I think. But Mac OS is like amazing and Windows 10 sucks. And so I finally figured out how to reprogram my whole keyboard so that my control key and my Apple, like my Alt key and all those keys are in the right place. And so I use this program called Sharp Keys. If you're trying to switch from Apple to PC, then check it out. My other thing is, and I suspect, Matt, you will know the answer to this. I was shocked. My wife made buffalo sauce yesterday. Do you have any idea what that stuff is made out of?
Vinegar and tomato paste?
It is butter and Frank's hot sauce.
Oh.
I've always wondered how it was made too.
Here's the recipe: 16 tablespoons of unsalted butter, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, and 1 1/3 cups of hot sauce, like Frank's or Crystal or something.
Gotcha.
But it's like,
but how do they get it to kind of have that consistency? Because the consistency is not. And now we can do a cooking podcast, but the consistency is not a buttery consistency. It's more light and liquid and fluid than that.
Yeah, I never thought of it. It's the hot sauce, because the hot sauce is really watery, but there's a thickness to buffalo sauce. So I actually fried a bunch of chicken in the hot sauce, in that homemade buffalo sauce, and it is amazing. If you like spicy stuff, it's really good. Well, if you guys have any questions for Numa, obviously you can find her on social media, but you can also email us and we can pass it forward. Our email address is justshootitpod@gmail.com. If you have any comments, thoughts, email us or call us at 1-262-SHOOT1 and leave us a voicemail. I'm on Twitter at SmiteyPyleg, on Instagram at OKaplan.
And I'm across all social media at Mr. Matt Enlow. This episode is edited by Sarah Weirda. Our webmaster is Ewan Williams, and you're listening to music provided by the Free Music Archive and the artist Jazar. Thanks everyone.